cool. Well, I didn't grow up in a Christian home or go to church, but had parents who decided that they would send me to Sunday school so I could figure out if there was a God. So probably when I was about 6 or 7, they sent me off to the local Baptist church, I think it was, and went there to Sunday school for quite a while, and then went to a Christian holiday camp, and I think I gave my heart to the Lord there when I was about 11, but then there was no follow-up or no discipleship, so I just kind of carried on my merry way. Probably backtracking a little bit, when I was probably about 6 or 7, I'd been with a big group of kids playing down at the beach, and had been molested by just a stranger, and that was really an event that kind of opened up a door to a lot of brokenness. So pretty much it sort of set my teen years on a downward spiral, really. By the age of 17, I found that I was pregnant, and pretty much without my parents' knowledge, I went through the process of organising an abortion, and went headlong into that with no other thought of, you know, that this was a baby, that this was a child. Just really don't want to do this, don't want to be found out. So I went through the whole process of having that abortion without my parents' knowledge. So the GP organised everything, went in, did the counselling, basically made up a bunch of lies. It's pretty easy, you know, to get an abortion in New Zealand. I don't know about other countries. Literally just made up a story about my dad's health. Was told to come back the following week, went back, had the termination, as they call it, went off home. But the odd thing was that I hadn't thought about this being a pregnancy or this being a baby, but the very moment it was ended, I lay there and started to cry, because it just kind of like, it was like a lead weight had fallen on me, and I went, this was a baby. I've just killed a baby. And it was like this, it just dawned on me, and it was like the whole process, it hadn't occurred to me at all. All I wanted was, I didn't want to be in this situation, and so I was trying to find a way out. So I went home and I didn't say anything to anyone, but then about 2 days later I began to bleed really, really heavy. So by then I had to involve my parents. So I ended up back in hospital having a D&C operation, and it was really traumatic, and I think I had no way of dealing with the guilt, no way of dealing with the shame of it. So I just kind of began to just get into this downward spiral, I think, and life just went downhill, really. It was just, you know, anything to cover up the pain, which didn't work. So probably fast track to, I was about 21, and I was working full time, and a guy in my office was a believer, and he just began to share the gospel with me. And he didn't actually say, he just said, I want to share my testimony with you. And I was like, had never been to church really, didn't know what a testimony was. I thought, oh, this is interesting. And he gave me this really crazy story about how, you know, Jesus had saved him, and all these lights and flashing lights, and, you know, he'd seen all these visions and all this stuff. But somewhere in the midst of this crazy story, the truth just hit my heart, and he just said to me, you know, you need to be right with God, and you need to accept what Christ has done on the cross for you. And it's like the truth just hit my heart. I didn't see anything, didn't feel anything, but I went, yeah, you're right. So I accepted the Lord into my life, and I went home. I didn't feel any different, but I knew something had changed. So I went home, and I was just about to get married, and I went home and I said to Richard, who I'm now married to, I've become a Christian. And he kind of looked at me like I was crazy, you know. He's like, what are you talking about? He'd grown up in the Catholic Church all his life, so he was like, you know, he'd had a real taste of religion, but he'd never met the Lord. So we got married. We just carried on. We got married, and I spent the next 2 years, I think, trying to convert him. So I did everything in my own power. I brought a Bill Zabriskie video home, and he's Māori, and the first thing he heard Bill saying was, out spirit of haka, or something like that. I mean, it was, you know, it was everything in my own strength to try to save this man, and, you know, he got more and more angry. But what literally happened, which was really cool, was after 2 years, God saved him in spite of me. You know, and he was hitchhiking, he was doing a building apprenticeship, and he was hitchhiking, he wasn't hitchhiking, he was driving into Wellington, and this one day he stopped at Paikakariki and parked his car, and he had gone into the shop, and this lady came out of Paikok, and she cut off a car that was going straight through at 100 k's, and this car literally veered into the parking lot and wrote his car off.
Oh my goodness.
He wasn't in it, he just got out to get in to go into the shop. But what happened out of that was that he then had to start hitchhiking to get into work every day. And believers started picking him up. And there's this one particular guy in a sports car who was a real estate agent on the coast, would pick him up and share the gospel and ask him if he could pray with him. And he'd go, no, thank you. You know, my wife's one of those fruitcake Christians, and I don't want you to pray for me. And this guy was really diligent, so he kept picking him up. This one night he was coming home, he got picked up, and there was this old van, and in the front was this guy with prison tats, and he had tats all up his arms. And so he drove all the way out, and he thought, well, one of them's got to be gay, and one of them's, you know, they're both crims, but they're either gay or they're crims, and they're going to, you know, something's going to happen on the way home. So he had his eye on the two of them, and but just as they're dropping him off, they said, look, we're actually Christians, can we pray for you? And he went, oh, phew. So he closed his eyes and they started praying, but then he felt arms round him, and he looked up because he thought, they're touching me, and he looked up and they were both like this with their hands in their lap praying, and he literally, it was either an angel or the Lord himself just literally hugged him, and he just began to weep and weep and weep. Well, of course, I thought he was doing drugs. I mean, we're going back a long time, we've been married 24 years. I thought he was maybe smoking marijuana in this car with these. He didn't even back then, but they just looked so dodgy. So I came storming up the driveway, and of course he gets out of the car and he's got this grin from ear to ear because he just got totally saved. And I'm yelling at everybody thinking they're drug dealers or something, enticing my husband down an even worse road than what he's already going on.
Now he's happy.
Now he's really happy. I couldn't wipe the smile off for hours and hours. So yeah, so I mean, that's a really short version of how we both got saved. Okay, well, I didn't grow up doing art, and I come from a really creative family, and I've got I've got a younger sister and an older sister, and my older sister is a graphic designer, and she went through the route of advertising and was an art director, so they're really creative. And my younger sister is probably in the top 30 designers in Australasia. They're really arty, but I didn't do anything with art at all, and I think I had this perception that I couldn't, number one, and I think I was probably told that I couldn't draw as well. So, but it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I knew that God had given me creative gifts, because I love doing craft type stuff, but I didn't really have any confidence, and then I just really had this desire to paint, just really did, and it really was born out of worship, because we always have been part of a prayer community, and I think it's just something that God began to stir in my heart, because the more I was spending time in His presence, the more I had the desire to be creative. And so that's where that sort of term intercessory worship comes from. But I also struggle with the fact that because I was and still am self-taught, I spend a lot of time gleaning off other people and just seeking the Lord. And I mean, the real cool thing is that you know, God gives a spirit of wisdom, and if you look in the Old Testament at Bezalel and the guys, you know, the craftsmen that God anointed, there is God-given gifts and talents that God will give, but then I think there's also, you know, I went through a whole stage of going, nothing that I actually did felt like it was actually any good. But I was on the internet one day and I saw this amazing worship artist, and I loved his work, and I sent him an email and I just said to him, look, I love what you're doing and it really, really ministers. And I just sort of shared a little bit of my journey with him, and he was, I didn't expect to hear from him, but he emailed me back and he said to me, look, the simplest drawing of a child that's done with a heart of worship to the Lord can actually impact and save lives. And he said, just don't bury your talent. And that really spoke to me, and I just went back and read the parable of the talents, and I just thought, okay, Lord, I'm not going to compare myself to someone who's been given 5 talents or 2 talents. I'm just going to start with a little bit you've given me and be faithful with that. And as I worship you and I spend time with you, that just whatever I do, I want to glorify you with that. And then if you give an increase in that, that's fine. Because I think there's a diligence that needs to come in actually, practicing and being diligent in learning yourself. But I think there's that supernatural increase that can come as well. So that's where I've come from with it. And it was really good to get that affirmation from him, because I felt like it was the Lord speaking to me. Even though he wrote it back to me, it was one of those things that was really quick into my heart, and I thought, okay, don't give up. He just said, don't quit. Don't quit because you don't feel like you're good enough. Just offer it to the Lord, and if it's from a heart of worship, then literally, God can use anything, even a simple drawing. And so that's where I started from. I think there's lots. I think, what was I going to say? I mean, even guys like Colin McCann, although, he wasn't a believer, and I think I love some of his paintings, and he was really mixed up when you read his, autobiography and stuff, and he suffered from depression and stuff. But I think, you can find wisdom. It's not only in Christian things. I mean, God, there is God-given wisdom, in different areas of life, not just, I'm not saying that right. I don't mean the world's wisdom, but there's God-given giftings that are out there, even some of the unredeemed gifts. I can't think of a specific artist, but I do really like Colin McCann. But there's some amazing Christian artists as well, and Aki Ann is one of them. She's amazing. Yeah, I have, and it's only little, and it's just got the words life on it, and it's got my older daughter Hannah and her brother Isaac on it. And it was a photo that was taken of them. They were just sitting in the dining room, and I turned it into black and white, and I kept looking at it, and it was at the time when they were doing the life sieges in America, and they were just putting the life tape on their mouth. And I just had this real this burden just to pray for the generation. And every time I looked at Isaac's face, it was just almost like, he almost looked mournful. And it's totally been my favourite, thing that I've ever done. And it just sits in our dining room. And my mum came in one day, she's not a Christian, and she looked at it. I couldn't get his nose right. I just could not do his nose. So I left it off. And in the end, I felt like, that God is raising a generation, a young generation, and to some degree, it's not that they don't have value, but they are nameless and faceless, because it's not going to be about them, it's going to be about Jesus. It's not going to be about a celebrity or a ministry, but there is a generation that are pure in heart that are being raised up around the globe. And so I just left his nose off in the end. I couldn't do it. So I just left it. But he's got this life tape over his mouth. And my mum came into the room and she said, he looks like he's screaming. Because you can't see his mouth, because all you can see is this red tape and life. And I just thought about the silent scream, the ultrasound, how they did that movie called The Silent Scream, and it was about an abortion. And they actually filmed it. And the abortionist who filmed it became pro-life. Wow. Because he filmed the first abortion they did by ultrasound. And it shocked him so much to see this tiny little baby in the womb being torn apart and screaming. They called it the silent scream. So, which isn't very nice, but but I love that picture, and it's my favourite. Okay, well, last November I was approached about using my art just at a pro-life conference, which was really cool, and they just set it up in a room, and people just went in the room to just chill out and just to reflect on, just in between the different seminars and the different speakers they had. So that was really neat to be asked to do that, and I did big display boards, so I had my testimony, and then I had I'd done different pictures of my paintings, some of them that had already been sold, so they were on big display boards, and then I had actual artwork on the walls. So it was really cool, and I had stuff like the poem out of Red Moon Rising by Peter Gregg, which is a fantastic poem, and stuff like that, just that people could sort of sit and just reflect on stuff. And they said it worked really, really well, so they wanted me to do it again this year. So we'll see how that goes. Well, I've got a blog, and I think that's suzannecarterartist.blogspot.com, and then I've got a just a web page as well, which is suzannecarter.mosaicglow.com. I think I have to confirm it in email you. But yeah, and I mean the last thing was just, you know, I have a real heart for children. I mean, I don't know, I really don't know what direction the Lord will take me in the future, just even for our family. But I really have this desire to sow whatever I get from painting and being creative into the lives of kids. You know, whether that's here, I mean, I'd love to adopt. But you know, that may not be something that the Lord's calling us to do, but I really want to sow, just to be able to sow, you know. And the really cool thing was, I just felt like we sponsor a little boy in the Philippines, but we just didn't have, as a family, we didn't have the funds to be able to give more financially right now. But it was just like, you know, but I can sow the things that I create. I can use that, because I can use what's, you know, what I've got in my hands. So I mean, so that's what I want to do, and I haven't quite figured out the next step for that one, but I'll find it. God will open up the right place to be able to put that into.